Hello, welcome to Wednesday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic. The eagle-eyed amongst you might be looking at the puzzle up on the screen and go, that's not Wednesday's puzzle. You're quite right, it's not, it's Monday's. I'm going to do a very quick run through of the last 3 days times cryptic crosswords. Just going to have a look at sort of 2 or 3 clues from each puzzle. And what I wanted to look at particularly is how one's vocabulary can be tested by the Times crossword, and how normally, as a rule, the wordplay can get you out of a hole even when you don't know the word. So that was certainly the case for me looking at Monday's crossword. There was a particularly nasty cross-section of entries here with 22 across. It's on the screen there. Bent half of a German sausage, 5 letters, crossing with 19 down, thickened water ice using egg in a mixture of agar, and then 23 down, cut cabbage the nation over for rich peasant. Now, if you'd played 23 down against me in Scrabble, I might have challenged it. I probably wouldn't have challenged 19 down, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you what it meant. And I certainly, although I do know the meaning of the definition in 22 across, I didn't know the name of the German sausage, which I was convinced would be Bratwurst or Frankenfurter or something like that. So let's just take a quick look at these clues, because I did get the crossword right, so I must have been able to access the right information from the wordplay in order to sort of unscramble what the answers probably were. Now, the first answer I got here was 19 down. So thickened water ice using egg in a mixture of agar. Now, I wasn't sure what the definition was. I thought it was either thickened water or thickened water ice. But I was absolutely sure that mixture of agar was an anagram of the letters of agar, so A-G-A-R somehow. This one wasn't too difficult, shortcut to get fuel. So gash shortened gives us gas. So this is all looking good with my anagram of agar around the edge. I think it's not too difficult to get an A here, although I think the answer at 28 across was right bank. And I, despite being a Londoner, I have never heard of the south of the Thames described as the right bank, but there we go, I'm sure it must be correct. And this was fine. I think that was initial, wasn't it? So let's put in an I here. So this was the construction that you're left with. You can see, I mean, it's probably unlikely that this is an R, so the R's probably going here. I need another A, so you're left with this construction, needing to come up with the answer. So a 3-letter word for egg that goes in here. Well, in the end I could only think of one, and that's the type of egg that you get in your hair if you're very unlucky. That is a nit. So granita, which I think comes from the Italian word for grainy. So I think the thickened water ice has that sort of texture. So then let's just fill in the checking letters that we get from these 2 answers here. Let's have a look at 23 down, which was the next one of this triumvirate that I solved. Cut cabbage the nation over for rich peasant. Well, the word for in the clue often means that the words preceding the word for are wordplay, and you have to juggle about with the wordplay, and that will, in order to give yourself the next part of the clue, the rich peasant. So for often precedes the definition. So I was expecting the definition to be rich peasant. I didn't know any words for rich peasants, so I was having to use what I had in the grid. Now, cut cabbage the nation over. Well, I can think of a short word for cabbage, which is kale, and that looked very good with this. So I could cut my word for kale, and then I need a 2-letter word for the nation, and I'm going to reverse the whole lot for my rich peasant. And the first thought I had for the nation was the UK, which would have made the answer this. Kulak. Sounds a bit like gulag, I guess, but with K's instead of G's. And I wasn't that confident it was the answer, but I was pretty sure about the cabbage part. The nation part, well, could be the US, but it would be a bit mean in the Times newspaper for the nation to be referring to America. So anyway, I went with this as quite probable, I guess, but with a little bit of trepidation. Now 16 down, what was this? This was checklist, I think. So you're left with this. Bent half of a German sausage. Well, here the words half of a German sausage, I think that has to be wordplay. So I knew I was looking for a 10-letter German sausage that I didn't know. So I'm left with guessing at a 5-letter word that means bent with this construction. The only one I could think of in the end. And it's not that easy. A synonym is knack. And it turns out there is something called a knack first, although I think in the US it's called a knock first, K-N-O-C-K. And, you know, that's in the end what I submitted, and it was correct. But just to give you all confidence that even though I've been doing these crosswords for a heck of a long time, decades, you know, there's lots of words I don't know, but sometimes the clues can get me out of trouble. Okay, so now what I've done is I've loaded up the grid anyway for Tuesday's puzzle. Now this was actually a pretty easy puzzle. If you look at the times that some of the very best solvers recorded on the website, I think Mark's in there with 3 minutes 30, so he finished the whole puzzle in 3 minutes 30. Now that is absolutely absurd, but this is a puzzle that I think somebody with a bit of experience could certainly be done in well under 10 minutes, which for a Times crossword is a very reasonable time. Why was it simple or relatively simple? Well, I think there was quite a lot of relatively accessible answers and perhaps a bit of crossword ease that really helps. I mean, even as I'm looking at it now, you know, waste carrier avoids small vessel. Well, you know, vessels, 4-letter vessels, crossword solvers are very familiar with a ewer, and it's not too difficult to take an S out of the word sewer to come up with ewer if you're used to looking for these sorts of things. But the clue I struggled a little bit with was actually 14 down. So stubborn little chap drank bottles. Now why did I struggle with this? Well, one of the reasons was I couldn't come up with I'll give you the letters that I had actually first. I had this construction. Right, so we've got to find something to fit in here. Stubborn little chap drank bottles. Now, as usual, when we're faced with a clue we don't understand, we should be trying to look for instructional words. We should be trying to divide the clue into the definition and the wordplay. So the only word or words that could potentially be instructional words here are the words drank and the word bottles, and both are interesting. I mean, drank it almost sounds like drunk, and drunk is so often an anagram indicator, but if something drank something else, it would suggest it might be surrounding it. But then you've got the next word, which is bottles, which is also very interesting, because if something bottles something else, it will surround it. So there are two alternative readings, if you like, of these last two words here, that if you haven't quite worked out what's going on, you know, they give you pause for thought. However, whichever one of those turns out to be, you know, the instruction in the wordplay, it's clear that both are wordplay. So I knew we were looking for a word, or two words hyphenated, that means stubborn. Many of you, I'm sure, were looking at this pattern and going, well, of course it's this answer. You're a fool, and you're right in many ways. I am a fool in there often. But if it didn't occur to you, I mean, I think the first thought I had was beef build. I wondered if there was a word beef build, and I liked beef build. I don't know quite why I did. It's a little bit alliterative, but I liked it because it contained the word bill, and I thought a little chap. Well, that could be Bill. Bill might be a little chap. You know, as in a shortened word for a proper name. And so I did spend a few moments thinking about build as the second word here and trying to come up with something that would mean stubborn. I didn't get very far. And then eventually I thought of the word will for another short little chap. And that gave me a way in to trying to guess at this construction, self-willed. But even now I didn't submit, even though I was pretty sure this was an expression that meant stubborn, because I wanted to just check I understood the wordplay. And I fixated on the word will in doing this, because that's how I'd sort of backed into this. I was sure that will was my little chap, and now I needed a word that meant drank. I was going to put outside my little chap and therefore get the answer. So what on earth did the word selfed meant? Well, selfed doesn't mean very much at all, but anyway, it took me some seconds to understand what was going on here. And this is, I suppose, the only advice I give you here is don't get fixated on a single idea. The best times crossword solvers show a lot of, I think, mental agility. You know, it's being able to jump from one idea to another without getting too fixated in any one place. And what I should have seen much more quickly, of course, is that a little chap could be an elf, ELF. And once you see elf in the middle of something, we can see swilled around the outside. And swilled means drank. So a very good clue in a sort of, you know, quite an easy rest of the crossword that significantly held me up. I think I would have been about 6 minutes had I been able to solve that more quickly. But anyway, let's move on to today's puzzle. Okay, it should be just loading up now. And the reason I want to talk, or decided to talk about sort of difficult words, if you like, is because I think today's puzzle had a lot of words that, you know, they were fairly obviously words, but once you've got them. But until you've got them, they are, you know, they're not quite words you'd use every day unless you're in a particular field or something like that. So there are quite a few examples in Wednesday's puzzle of relatively awkward. Let me just adjust this slightly so that it's a bit more centered. That's not worked. Hang on. Well, I'm failing miserably to get this centered, but it doesn't matter because 26 across isn't one of the answers that I want to look at. So, first word, 13 across. Bore raring to be heard. Well, it's not that this is a difficult or a particularly difficult wordplay. I mean, I'm sure if many of us, if asked to come up with a word that meant raring, as in keen, we would immediately come up with the word eager. But knowing that eager with an ER ending is a homophone for eager with an RE ending, and then knowing what eager means, I think it's some sort of tidal wave that sometimes appears on a river. You know, I think people can be forgiven for not knowing that. But again, the wordplay does help you out. It gives you enough that even if you've never seen this word before, you can be fairly sure that it's correct. Now let's just have a look at a couple of others. So here, fellow backing judge leaving large aircraft plant. Now I have my first wrong thought of the day here, in the sense that I thought that a judge leaving a large aircraft would be a J, leaving the word jet for a large aircraft. I'd forgotten, of course, that there's also a jumbo, which is another, well, it's probably the jumbo jet, obviously, but a jumbo is another large aircraft. If we take the J out of jumbo instead, we get this construction, looking for a plant, remember. Now, many of you will immediately know this, but it's something that I really only come across in crosswords than nilumbo. And it's a reversal of len at the start there. But again, there's enough to get it, especially if you get the checking letters. But without the checking letters, it's not easy, because coming up with a reversal for 3 letters meaning fellow where it can be any three-letter name of a fellow, well, there are probably 100 different three-letter names for fellows, so, or men. So not that straightforward, and I think you could be forgiven if you aren't familiar with the Nelumbo, for taking your time over that one. Again, the monkey, it's not an outrageous word here, but it's not a word you use every day. Here, what you need to do is to put the word tan for yellow-brown around the first day of the month. And what the setter was doing here was using March the 1st in the middle. So how you might write March the 1st is Mar1. And if you put that in tan, you get tamarin, which is the name of a type of monkey. Again, not impossible and very gettable from the wordplay, but not easy. Let's just have a look at a couple of the others. There were more, I think 2 down also. For example, a currency set up for animal accommodation. Again, as we said earlier on in the video, the word for here is very helpful. You know you're looking for a word that means animal accommodation. For example, that's e.g. Oops. A, well, the A shouldn't be there unless it means something, so let's put the A in. So I'm looking for a reversal of a word for a currency here, the whole thing meaning animal accommodation. Well, just pause the video if you don't immediately know the answer there, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I don't think it is that easy a word. Eventually you have to come up with the word real as the currency. It's not mark, it's not quid or anything else, it's real, which if you reverse it, you get lairage, which is a word for animal accommodation. So again, not straightforward. Let's do 2 more. 14 across, hubbub exposed in daily, one modified when editors absent. Okay, so again, when I look at that clue, immediately I'm thinking it means hubbub, because the words when editors absent are suggesting to me I need to remove an ed from something. But this isn't that easy, you know. A word for a daily, well, you might be thinking daily newspaper, but in Times crossword language it's almost always the charwoman, which can be shortened to char, who is, you know, somebody who cleans daily, that is being referred to. So there you go, char at the start. Can you write in the rest of it? It's not easy. One modified, or one is one. Modified, we need a 6-letter word for modified. We're going to remove an ed from at the end here. Again, pause if you need to. Varied without ed gives you charivari, is that how you say that? Which I think is the sort of, it's when people bang pots and pans at weddings and things like that to introduce the bride and groom. Not perhaps a word we use every day, and certainly one I only know from crosswords. And finally, which was the other one I wanted to look at? Yeah, 17 down again. You know, so we've got 5 clues already, which are to words that are slightly unusual. And 17 down, old-fashioned resentment when leader goes for good fish. Well, here the word for isn't quite doing the same thing. Here, what's happening is that we need to come up with a 7-letter word, which means is an old word for resentment. So already that's probably got you frowning, because it's not that easy to come up with that. And then when leader goes for good is saying, get that 7-letter word, dismiss its first letter, its leader, replace it with a G, which is an abbreviation, a valid abbreviation for the word good, and that will give you the 7-letter word, which means a fish. And yeah, it's not, again, not straightforward. Depends how many checking letters, I guess, to be honest, that you have. But this is the most you could have got, so have a think about it. Perhaps many of you are thinking this is easy. I didn't think it was easy, but gudgeon is the answer. Gudgeon being fish, and high dudgeon, you might probably heard that expression, state of high dudgeon. Dudgeon is an old word which means resentment, so that's how the clue worked. So a lot of interesting vocabulary in Wednesday's puzzle, and I hope this was a useful run through of how to go about cracking some of the harder clues. So thanks for watching, and we're back again tomorrow on Cracking Cryptic.